Hi, and thanks for joining my channel today. We're going to be looking at repairing an AC unit. So this is running, but it's not blowing out any cold air. Most likely we're thinking what's wrong with this is the run capacitor. I'd opened this earlier and it does have two run capacitors, so I purchased those, and today I'm going to be doing the replacement. Now, the most important thing you want to remember on this is whenever you're working on electrical equipment, isolate the source of power, disconnect it before you start doing any work. And with HVAC units and anything that has a capacitor, pay attention. Capacitors do store charge in them, so just because you've disconnected a system from the main power supply does not mean there isn't any electrical charge in it. Just remember to discharge your capacitor before you go ahead and start disconnecting the wires. So let's get to it. So this is the unit we're going to be working on today. It's a Lennox, and typically you would have your disconnect right next to it. In that case, that's the disconnect by the wall. I'm going to go over there and show you how to disconnect power from your unit. So to disconnect power from your unit, you lift, right? See what that looks like. You pull this out, right? And your unit is disconnected. So to get to your capacitors, you would have to take out this panel, and usually these are held by 4 screws. So I'm going to take those screws out and open it, and you see what it looks like on the inside. Alright, I've taken out the screws. Just pull out the panel. I'll set that aside, and let's go a little bit closer. That is your capacitor. This unit, actually, it turns out they have 2 capacitors on there, and when we redo the wiring, I'm gonna redo that exactly as they have it in here. So if you're not sure how to wire this, just go ahead and take a picture. But the way this is wired, there's no wiring on the fan on this main capacitor. I believe the fan is wired on this secondary capacitor. So we're gonna follow the exact same setup here. Just make sure you take a picture of it and you know exactly where these connections go before you start disconnecting. If you haven't bought your capacitor, what you can do is open this unit, make sure you follow the exact specification. So this is an 85 microfarad with a plus of minus 5% margin on the charge you can hold. I believe this is a 10. I opened it up earlier. It's a 10 with a plus or minus 6. Plus or minus, that can be different. It can be 5 or 6. What you want to make sure that it's the same rating and the voltage is the same. This is dual voltage, 440, 370. So make sure you match that exactly. You don't have to match the exact same brand. So I'm going to go ahead. The capacitor is held together by that screw, but first I'm going to discharge it before we go ahead and start taking it out. To discharge this, you can use a screwdriver. Make sure that the handle is insulated, and while you're doing this, do not touch the metal portion of the screwdriver. All right, what you're going to do is you're going to tap on the common and 2 sides. You do that repeatedly just to make sure that you've completely discharged it. Alright, we'll do the same here for the smaller one. Alright, so that's my new capacitor. Same specifications as the old one. So looking at there, you can see that's C, hermetic, and that's the fan. All right, so we'll go ahead and connect it. I'm actually gonna, now that this is out, you can see that the purple and red wires are on C and the yellow wires are on the Herm. So we're going to reconnect it exactly the same on the new capacitor. I've connected the yellow wires to Herm. Then now I'm gonna move the other 2 wires. So I've connected the red and purple wires to C, and now I'm noticing that the purple wire on C actually goes to the other capacitor, and from there it gets wired back into the HVAC unit. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the new 10 microfarad capacitor that I got. For now, what I'm gonna do, the larger 85, I'm gonna mount this back, then we'll deal with the smaller capacitor. So that's it mounted. A good point to note, when you do mount it, just be sure to allow the label to be visible. So if you need to look at it the next time, you don't need to take off the screws from it. Now the next step is the smaller capacitor. We're gonna swap this out. All right. Now looking at this, so these are the capacitors side by side. The Titan is the old one that I'm replacing, and you see both of them are the 10 microfarads. So doing this, it helps to, if you have needle nose pliers, they are excellent to just grab these and pull them out. So that's what I'm using. So there you go, that's connected. I'm going to mount it back into the unit, just as the old one was. Now we've got everything back in there. We're going to do the reverse process. I'm going to mount the panel and screw it back in place, and we're done. And we're done. Remember, we got to turn the power back on, or we got to connect it back on. I'm going to re-engage the connection. What you want to watch out, just pay attention which direction this came out in. You have to put it back in the same direction, because some of them you can flip it over and still slide it in. But if I flipped it over and slide it in, this will still be disconnected, so your unit will not power on, and you would think maybe you did something wrong. So you got to keep it this way. To be sure, you can look in there. I don't know if that's clear. You see at the bottom, that's where these prongs slide into. So I'm gonna connect that back in. Make sure it's in. We close this and we go test.